Life is not a series of random notes scattered and disjointed, but a composition woven by unseen hands, guided by a rhythm older than time. The delays, the detours, the silence that feels like abandonment, these are not the absence of movement, but the quiet preludes of something divine. Every unanswered prayer, every restless night, every closed door is a note in a song too vast for human ears to hear in its fullness. Consider this: the stars are not thrown into the sky without order. The tides do not rise and fall without purpose, and neither do the seasons of your life unfold without meaning. What feels like stillness is often the deep breath before the breakthrough. What seems like emptiness is merely space being prepared for glory. God is moving even now. The unseen currents of heaven are shifting in your favor. And when the time is right, the melody will swell and the miracle you've been waiting for will arrive. Precisely on cue. There are moments in life when heaven seems silent. You pray, but the answer doesn't come. You knock, but the door remains closed. You search for direction, yet all you find is an endless stretch of uncertainty. It feels as though you've been forgotten, left to wander through a season of stillness. But let me tell you something. What you call silence, God calls preparation. Think of a great symphony. Before the music begins, there is a hush. The audience waits, expectant. The conductor lifts his hands, but no sound follows, not yet. It is in this moment that the masterpiece is gathering its breath, ready to be unveiled in perfect time. And so it is with your life. What looks like inactivity is often the stillness before the song of God's favor begins to play. You see, we are restless people. We measure progress by movement. We think if we aren't advancing, if things aren't changing, then nothing is happening. But the greatest works of God are often accomplished in the quiet. When a seed is buried in the soil, it seems as though nothing is happening. The ground looks the same day after day, but beneath the surface, life is stirring. Roots are forming. Strength is being established. The miracle is in motion. You just can't see it yet. Some of you have been in a season like that. You've been faithful. You've held on. You've trusted. But nothing seems to be shifting. You wonder if God has forgotten you. My friend, listen to me. He has not forgotten you. His delays are not his denials. His silence is not his absence. There was a man named Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream of greatness, yet his reality looked nothing like the vision. He was betrayed, thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and locked in a prison. Years passed, and there was no sign of the promise. If anyone had reason to believe God had abandoned him, it was Joseph. But all along, something unseen was unfolding. Every trial, every hardship, every delay was setting the stage for a moment he couldn't yet imagine. And when the time was right, when all the pieces were in place, the doors of that prison swung open, and Joseph was elevated to a position he never could have reached on his own. What if Joseph had given up in the silence? What if he had walked away, convinced that God had changed his mind? My friend, if you are in a season where nothing seems to be moving, do not let go of your faith. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. God is setting things in motion, arranging circumstances, aligning opportunities, working behind the scenes in ways you cannot yet comprehend. One day the silence will break. One day the door will open. And when it does, you will realize that every moment of waiting was necessary. Every delay was purposeful. Every prayer you thought had gone unanswered was actually being woven into a plan far greater than your own. So hold on. Stay faithful. Keep trusting. The silence is not the end of your story. It is only the breath before the miracle. We don't like obstacles. We don't like struggles. We want a smooth road, a clear path, a journey free from resistance. But have you ever stopped to wonder? What if the very thing standing in your way is the thing leading you to where you're meant to be? What if the delays, the difficulties, and the disappointments are not detours, but divine directions? Think about a river. When it flows freely, it's easy to follow its course. But when a boulder falls into its path, the water doesn't stop. It doesn't turn around and give up. No, it moves around the obstacle. It finds a new path. It carves new ground. And in time, that very resistance shapes the river itself. Some of you have faced obstacles that seemed impossible to overcome. A dream you had was blocked. An opportunity you longed for slipped away. A door you were sure would open never did. And you've wondered, God, why did this happen? Why didn't you remove the barrier? But what if I told you that the obstacle was never meant to stop you? It was meant to shape you. What if I told you that God is using the very thing you thought was against you to guide you into something far greater? There was a young shepherd named David. He wasn't born into royalty. He wasn't raised in a palace. He was out in the fields, tending sheep, overlooked by his own family. But God had a plan. And when the time came for him to step into his calling, God didn't place a golden crown on his head. No, he placed a giant in his path. Goliath wasn't a mistake. He wasn't an accident. That giant was David's doorway to destiny. Think about that for a moment. The very thing that looked like an impossible obstacle was actually the opportunity that changed everything. If David had run from the fight, if he had let fear convince him that the battle was too big, he would have missed what God had prepared for him. But because he stood firm, because he trusted, because he believed that the power of God was greater than the size of his opposition, the obstacle became his stepping stone. And so it is with you. The challenges you are facing are not there to destroy you. They are there to strengthen you, to refine you, to shape you into the person God created you to be. Every time life presses against you, every time you face a situation that seems unfair or impossible, you have a choice. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. God never promised that the road would be easy, but he did promise that he would never leave you. He never said you wouldn't face battles, but he did say that he would fight for you. And sometimes the very thing you see as your greatest opposition is actually your greatest opportunity. Some of you are standing before a giant right now. It looks too big, too strong, too impossible. But hear me, God has not brought you this far to leave you now. The challenge you are facing is not a sign that God is against you. It is a sign that he is for you. And when the time is right, when you stand firm in faith, you will look back and see that what you thought was an obstacle was actually a doorway. So don't be afraid. Don't turn back. The resistance you feel is not the end of your story. It is the hand of God carving a path where there seemed to be no way. We live in a world that moves fast. We want answers now. We want doors to open immediately. We measure time by deadlines, schedules, and expectations. And when things don't happen on our timeline, we begin to wonder if they'll happen at all. But God does not work by our clocks. He does not rush. He is never late, never early, always perfectly on time. The problem is, we don't see what he sees. We see a single moment, a single request, a single chapter of our story. But he sees the whole picture, the beginning and the end, the intricate connections between events that we could never understand in the present. Think about the stars in the sky. They seem to shine randomly, scattered across the heavens. But scientists tell us they move with astonishing precision. They follow paths set in place from the beginning of time, each one exactly where it is meant to be. And so it is with the events of your life, the things you thought were delays, the times you felt forgotten, the prayers that seemed to go unanswered. None of it was wasted. God was aligning things, setting the stage, orchestrating a plan so much greater than what you could see. There was a man named Abraham. God gave him a promise, told him he would be the father of many nations. But years passed and nothing happened. He grew old. His wife grew old. The promise seemed impossible. But what Abraham didn't know was that God's plan wasn't just about him. His promise was connected to generations, to a lineage that would lead all the way to the birth of the Savior. Had Abraham received the promise the moment he wanted it, it wouldn't have fit into the grand design of history. And when the time was right, when everything was in place, God's promise came to pass. Some of you are waiting on something right now. You've prayed, you've believed, but nothing seems to be happening. And you're wondering, God, where are you? Why is this taking so long? But what if I told you that your answer is already on its way? What if I told you that behind the scenes, God is shifting things, moving people, creating opportunities, setting things in motion in a way you cannot yet see? The waiting is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It is a sign that he is working. Think about an artist painting a masterpiece. If you were to look at the canvas too soon, you might see nothing but scattered brushstrokes, colors that don't make sense, lines that seem to lead nowhere. But as time goes on, the picture begins to emerge. The design becomes clear, and in the end, what once looked like a mess is revealed to be a masterpiece. And God is painting a masterpiece with your life. The delays, the setbacks, the waiting, it's all part of the process. And when the time is right, when all the pieces are in place, what seemed confusing will suddenly make perfect sense. Some of you have been discouraged. You felt like giving up, but let me tell you, God is not finished. The story is not over. The answer is not no, it is not yet. Hold on, keep believing, keep trusting. The delay is not a denial, it is the hand of God working in ways you cannot yet see. And when the appointed time comes, what was once uncertain will become undeniable. There are moments in life when nothing makes sense. You look around and wonder why things turned out the way they did. You had dreams, plans, expectations, but somehow reality took a different course. The doors you thought would open remained shut. The answers you prayed for never seemed to come. And now you stand in the middle of an unfinished story, trying to make sense of a picture that isn't complete. But let me tell you something, God never starts a story without knowing how it will end. What looks unfinished to you is already completed in his hands. What seems broken is already being restored. You may only see fragments, but he sees the full masterpiece. Think about a tapestry. From the back, it looks like a mess, threads tangled together, colors that don't seem to match, knots and loose ends that appear to have no purpose. But when you turn it around, you see the design, the beauty, the intention behind every single thread. That's what God is doing with your life. Right now, you may only see the underside. You may see the struggle, the confusion, the unanswered questions. But one day, God will turn the tapestry around and you'll see that every thread, every knot, every struggle was part of something far greater than you could have imagined. There was a man named Moses. He was called to lead a nation to bring God's people out of slavery. But before he could step into that calling, he found himself in the wilderness. 40 years in the desert, forgotten by the world, a man who once lived in a palace now tending sheep in the middle of nowhere. It would have been easy to believe his story was over, that he had missed his purpose. But God had not forgotten him. Those years in the wilderness were not wasted. They were preparation. And when the time was right, when the story was ready to unfold, God called him back, not as a lost man, but as a leader. Some of you feel like Moses in the wilderness. You feel like your story has been interrupted, like the best days are behind you, like your purpose has passed you by. But listen to me. God does not waste a single chapter. What looks like a detour is often the very path he is using to get you where you need to be. Think of the disciples. When Jesus was crucified, they thought the story was over. They had given up everything to follow him, believing he was the one who would bring victory, who would change everything. But then he was gone, and all their hopes seemed to be buried in that tomb. They couldn't see what was coming. They didn't know that Sunday was on its way, that the greatest miracle in history was about to unfold. Right now, you may be standing in a Friday moment. You may feel like all hope is lost, but don't forget, God writes resurrection stories. What looks like the end is often just the beginning of something greater. Some of you have prayed for things that haven't happened yet. You've held on to promises that still feel far away. But let me remind you, just because you don't see the full picture yet doesn't mean the story isn't unfolding. The author of your life has already written the final page, and when you see it, you'll understand why every chapter was necessary. So don't give up. Don't lose heart. What seems unfinished is simply unfolding, and when God's plan is revealed, you'll stand in awe of the masterpiece He was creating all along. Sometimes, before something great happens, there's a shift, a stirring in the air, a quiet whisper in your soul. You may not be able to explain it, but something feels different. It's as if heaven itself is holding its breath, waiting for the appointed moment when everything will change. God moves in patterns. He rarely announces a miracle with trumpets or grand displays. Instead, He often begins with subtle signs, gentle nudges, small moments that seem insignificant at first, a conversation that leads to an unexpected opportunity, a delay that places you in the right place at the right time, a feeling deep inside that tells you something is coming even when you can't see it yet. Think about the wind. You can't see it, but you can feel its presence. You can watch as the leaves begin to move, as the branches sway, as the waves shift on the water's surface. The wind gives evidence of something greater at work, something unseen but undeniable. And so it is with the movement of God. Before the miracle arrives, there are always signs, small at first, quiet at first, but real. Elijah understood this. The land had been in drought for years, no rain, no crops, no relief. The people had given up hope. But Elijah climbed a mountain and prayed. And when he sent his servant to look toward the sea for a sign, the answer came back the same. There is nothing. Over and over again, Elijah sent him back, and every time the answer was nothing. But Elijah knew something was shifting. He knew God was moving. And on the seventh time, the servant came back and said, I see a cloud the size of a man's hand. A cloud the size of a man's hand isn't much. It's barely visible in the vast sky. But Elijah knew what it meant. He knew that behind that tiny cloud, the rain was coming. The drought was ending. The miracle was already in motion. Some of you are looking at your life right now and seeing nothing. You've prayed, you've waited, and still the sky seems empty. But I want to ask you, are you watching for the signs? Are you paying attention to the whispers, the small shifts, the quiet moments where God is trying to tell you, I'm moving, I'm working, the rain is coming? Look at how Jesus performed His miracles. When He turned water into wine, He didn't just speak and make it appear. He had the servants fill the jars first. When He fed the 5,000, He didn't create a feast out of nothing. He started with a boy's small lunch. Again and again, He took something small and used it to bring about something miraculous. What if the thing you're dismissing as small, as insignificant, as not enough, is the very thing God is about to multiply? What if the delay, the quiet shift, the unanswered prayer is not a denial, but the first ripple of something greater than you can imagine? Think of a woman carrying a child. For months, there is no visible evidence of life, nothing but silence. But within her, a miracle is unfolding, a heartbeat, a forming hand, a tiny breath preparing to take in the air of this world. Just because she can't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. And when the time is right, new life enters the world and the promise is fulfilled. God's miracles don't always arrive in an instant. Sometimes they begin as a whisper, a small shift, a single cloud in the distance. But when they come, when the heavens open, when the impossible becomes reality, it happens suddenly. So open your eyes, pay attention, watch for the subtle signs of His movement. Because when God begins to stir the waters, the miracle is not far behind. There comes a moment when God says, it is time. A moment when the waiting ends, the door swings open, and what seemed impossible becomes reality. And when that moment comes, it happens suddenly. For so long you have been holding on. You have been walking by faith, trusting through the silence, believing in the unseen. There were days you felt strong and days you felt weak, moments when hope burned bright and moments when doubt crept in. But through it all, God was working. He was preparing, arranging, aligning every detail. And when the appointed time comes, nothing can stop his hand. Think about Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, a vision of what God had planned for him. But before he could step into that destiny, he was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and locked away in a prison cell. Year after year he waited, and I can imagine that there were nights when he wondered if the dream had been nothing more than a mistake. But what Joseph couldn't see was that his breakthrough was closer than he thought. One day, everything changed. In the morning, he was a prisoner. By nightfall, he was standing in the palace, second in command over an entire nation. Not a slow process, not a gradual shift. No, when God was ready to move, it happened in an instant. And everything he had been through, every painful moment, every delay, every disappointment, it had all been leading to that one divine moment. Some of you are standing right on the edge of that moment. You've been waiting, you've been believing, and now you can feel it. You are on the verge of something new. This is how God works. When he moves, it is swift. When he answers, it is beyond what we could have imagined. The years of waiting, the long nights of prayer, the seasons of silence, they are not forgotten. They were necessary. They were preparing you for what is about to come. Think about the disciples on the boat. The storm was raging, the waves were crashing, and they thought they were going to drown. But in an instant, Jesus stood and spoke, "Peace, be still." And just like that, the storm ended. No warning, no delay, just sudden peace. Or think about the woman who had been sick for 12 years. She had tried everything, spent everything, and yet nothing had changed. But then, in a single moment, she reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' robe. And in that moment, after 12 long years, she was healed. God is a God of sudden breakthroughs. And when he does, no force in heaven or earth can stand in his way. Some of you have been feeling weary. You've been waiting so long that hope has started to fade. But let me tell you, the moment of breakthrough is often the moment right after the greatest struggle. The darkest hour is always just before the dawn. You don't have to make it happen. You don't have to force the doors open. When God declares that it is time, things will shift. Opportunities will appear. Answers will come. And what once seemed distant will suddenly be standing right in front of you. So don't give up. Don't lose heart. You are closer than you think. And when the moment comes, when God moves in your favor, it will be sudden, it will be powerful, and it will be undeniable.